such a time as this.
And welcome back to For Such a Time as This. I'm your host, Pastor James Pittman, here again with Don Veinot, president of Midwest Outreach. Thank you for being here again, Don.
It's my pleasure. Love being along with you.
So, the topic this week, the rise, what is progressive occultism? Don, what is progressive occultism and where do we see it in our culture today?
Well, actually, we see it quite a bit. You know, progressivism, we already know what that is. It's a political ideology. And the truth is, pretty much all of us have a worldview, and our politics, decisions we make about our family life and those sorts of things all stem from our worldview. And this article, I thought it was pretty interesting. It's not written by a Christian as far as I can tell. It's in a secular publication. And it starts out talking about AOC.
Our favorite.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who shared her birth, not just her birth date, but the time of her birth, so that they could create a more accurate astrology chart. And then it goes on to talk about that. And why is that important? Well, because it affects her politics, as it turns out. And then it goes on to talk about the effect of New Age, anything from astrology to witchcraft. Now, what I felt was interesting about this is it wasn't that many years ago when we talked about astrology and the New Age as not a good thing in society, although it was growing. I mean, basically, New Age is Eastern mysticism, westernized. But now we're talking about witchcraft as though it's sort of a normal religious view. And it is becoming one, actually.
You know, Don, one thing I'm realizing is that a lot of people say they want a separation of religion and state. What they really mean, they want to separate or kick out the Christian religion. But there are so many other religions that they are so readily pushing when it comes to politics. And this is just another one. This is clearly occult practices.
Well, yeah, and most Christians don't understand witchcraft and Wicca. I mean, they immediately go to that Satanism, and although it would be true to say that it is satanically inspired, it is not overtly so. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a lot of things that Satan can dream up that will allow us to participate without realizing where it actually came from. So witches are not saying all hail Satan and sacrificing babies. They view it as nature worship by and large. And so within Wicca, which has grown in 1990, there were about 8,000 practicing Wiccans. Those who would say publicly, I am a Wiccan. One of the oldest Wiccan groups is up here in Wisconsin, actually, run by Selena Fox, called Circle Sanctuary. It's one of the oldest 501c3 tax-exempt religious organizations. Today, though, there's over 1 million practicing Wiccans. It's very fast-growing and has a great deal of appeal to millennials because it gives you the ability to feel spiritual and not dogmatic. That's really important. Feel spiritual and not dogmatic.
And if you are dogmatic, guess what? I control the dogma. And so no one has a problem with that so long as I can control the dogma. Right?
Well, yes, and that's as long as I personally am controlling the dogma.
Yes, that's what I mean.
In fact, if you talk with a Wiccan for very long and you ask them what Wicca is about, generally they're going to start off with something like, Wicca for me is, and then they'll fill in the blank. Because there's no universal description of what Wicca is. There's no dogmatic assertions about witchcraft or Wicca. Although, I don't know if you recall this, but during the Supreme Court hearings with Brett Kavanaugh, the Brooklyn witches publicly put a hex on the Supreme Court
Yep.
are on him while that was going on.
Yep.
So it's what they call magic resistance. Magic resistance. Kind of interesting phenomenon going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sadly, most Christians, as I say, are not really aware of that. I'll read just a section of this. Progressive occultism, the language of witches and demons, of spells and sage, of cleansing and bad energy, of star and signs, has become the de facto religion of millennial progressives.
Yeah.
The metaphysical symbols set threaded through the worldly ethos of modern social justice activism. Its rise parallels the rise of religious nuns, and with them the model of spiritual and religious practice that's at once institutional and atomized. 23% of Americans call themselves religiously unaffiliated, a number that spikes to 36% among millennials. So, where is the church in all of this? Again, and it's something that you and I talk about personally. It's something that we write about as a ministry, Midwest Christian Outreach. It's something that I teach on when I go to churches and to conventions, and that is the church is supposed to be for believers. I
Yes.
know that's a new concept for some. It's not for unbelievers. That doesn't mean they should be unwelcome. They should be welcome. If
Yeah.
unbelievers come in, they should
Yep.
definitely be welcome and made to feel as comfortable as possible.
Mm.
But it's a family time. It is a time when the pastor should be opening the book
Yep.
called the Bible.
Yep.
Teach, starting with verse 1,
Yep.
chapter 1 of whatever book, and
Mm-hmm.
preaching right through it till the end of that book. And, it's a really interesting thing. I've watched this with my pastor. Every major issue in life is going to be crossed as you
Yep.
go through the book.
Yep.
Every one.
But you know what, Don? It also ties me if I'm preaching expository. So we're in Ephesians. We start in chapter 1. We're going to go all the way to the end of the book. When you do that, though, that ties you to the Word of God. And now it's no longer my word, but it's your word. Because I can guarantee you, if you preach one Sunday in chapter 3 and then next Sunday you're in chapter 5, people are saying, well, what happened to chapter 4? You don't like what's in chapter 4, so you simply skip chapter 4? See, you can't do that when you go expository. You simply let the Word of God say what it says, and you teach what it says. And when you do that, God and truth will be preached. But if there's certain topics that I don't like to deal with, if there's certain things going on in the culture that I don't want to tackle, and we talked about this also, because I'm afraid, then I'll go to topical. And I will pick and choose topics that are non-controversial, topics that'll make people like me. See, and that's when preachers who don't preach expository, that's what they do. They want people to like them, so they stay away from the topics.
Well, actually, you know me better than that. You might recall the first time I preached in your church, when I stood up there, I said, almost the first thing I said is, it is probable that I will offend somebody before I'm done with this today.
Yeah.
And I will apologize that you decided to be offended. I won't apologize for what I said.
But Don, honestly, how many men in ministry do you know have that attitude?
Not enough.
And I said off air. Boy, well, I just wish they had more pastors who were willing or who had a desire to preach truth and please God instead of please man. But
well, if you think your job as a pastor is to be the CEO and bring about numerical and financial growth, broaden your market base, then you have to work at not offending anybody.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be, own Burger King and offend patrons because they're not going to come and buy your burgers, right?
Yeah.
The church that's not what the church is for. It is for believers to be trained, equipped. It's a place where they can come and have a respite from the world trashing their beliefs.
Yeah.
Because you know what, they're more and more going to be hanging. It's going to be more the case that the person working next to them is a practicing Wiccan,
Yeah.
and they are not going to know what to say to them because
Yeah.
they haven't been trained in the church that was worried about growing the market base.
Yeah. Yeah. And in our church, hopefully, we look at Sundays to where true believers can rally around the truth and be encouraged by the truth to refocus. And in Ephesians, the book of Ephesians, what we're saying is, hey, we're supposed to live our lives here in time under the shadow and auspices of eternity, and let eternity guide our time here on earth. And I think that's what we all should be doing. So we rally around the truth, encouraged by the truth, to be reminded of the truth, so we can live by the truth. Don, last word.
Last word. I would say if you have time and you don't mind reading, go on the net and look for the title of the article.
We'll put it in the description.
Progressive Occultism.
Yeah.
Read that because it gives you a good view of where we are as a culture.
Yeah.
And pastors can be challenged to say, you know, I need to do something different for my people. They can contact me.
Yeah.
I'd be glad to come and speak and help them work through some of these issues.
All right. Thanks a lot, Don, president of Midwest Outreach. I'm your host, Pastor James Pittman. Until next time. See you again, Don.
For such a time as this,